The creature slowly crawled toward him, its hand taking form. As it morphed its hand into a sharp weapon, it swiftly stood up and charged at him. He managed to block its attack. Trembling, he acknowledged the vast level gap between them. Activating his hunt mark, he invoked his title as Wolf Hunter, boosting his attack power by 7%. Panicked, he attacked the creature, realizing that it was a dead body without a weak point. Then he noticed the red line on its back. As the creature was about to bite him, he realized that to defeat it, he must sever all of those lines. With a forward swing of his sword, he forced the creature back, then leaped behind it and cut the red line on its back. The creature collapsed, lifeless, and he gained 12-0 experience. Surprised by the considerable amount of experience he earned, he understood that pinpointing a weak spot was key to an easy kill. As he excitedly checked his newly acquired experience, he abruptly stopped, remembering something crucial. The dungeon of the deceased country was difficult to clear due to a time limit. Being a place for the dead to rest, it forbade living humans from disturbing it. If he didn't clear it quickly, he would become one of the dead. Suddenly, he heard the objects hanging from the roots stirring. Turning around, he noticed them breaking. Aware that he could barely handle one, he knew he was in trouble if they all attacked together. As the Death Elves emerged, he sprinted away, frantically questioning how he could win, and implored Osset to quickly extract him. Meanwhile, Osset was engrossed in a magazine, appreciating the attractive bodies depicted within. Suddenly, he sneezed and wondered if skeletons could sneeze. Later, the Death Elves lay defeated, and Wu was exhausted from battle. Suddenly, he felt his hand start to move on its own, attacking him. He panicked, realizing his hand was no longer under his control. He knew that if the virus spread throughout his body, he would lose control entirely and become trapped. Worse, he wouldn't be able to leave. Then he remembered the ring Osset had given him. Suppressing his rogue hand, he deduced that the tree, being made from the roots of the skyline tree, should resist the virus. He slipped the ring onto his possessed hand, and the virus vanished. Looking at his hand in frustration, he wondered if the foolish skeleton prince had purposefully sent him here. But his misfortune continued. The objects hanging on the tree stirred again, and more Death Elves emerged to attack him. In desperation, he activated his demonic form and was about to counterattack when a strong pink light struck the elves. Surprised, he watched as the elves turned to ashes and faded away. Staring at the potent light, he wondered about its origin. Then, a figure appeared behind the light, and he was stunned to see the female martial goddess emerge. He was relieved to be saved, but he was curious about her appearance when she should have been on the front line. The goddess assumed a fighting stance against him. Shocked, he raised his hands in the air, puzzled about why she was preparing to attack him. He realized his situation was dire in his demonic form. He would be perceived as an enemy by the goddess. He could have handled the earlier undead, but being targeted by the goddess was akin to facing death itself. The goddess remained vigilant, observing him, but she eventually lowered her sword. She wondered why she felt a sense of familiarity with this demon, and why it felt as though she had known Wu for a long time. Meanwhile, in the Player Management Association building, Bing Yun reported to Lei that yesterday's explosion had caused many players from the association to suffer severe injuries. At the first front line in Burning Land, the Goddess Martial Artist Guild had suffered 166 deaths, and 280 members had lost their will to fight. The Lightning Dragon Guild had lost 5 members and 102 had lost their will to fight. The Green Sheep Guild reported 30 deaths and 72 members who'd lost their will to fight. Lastly, the Yun Teng Guild had 13 deaths and 51 members who'd lost the will to fight. In addition, the front line had been seized and surviving players had retreated to Darren Village in the Great Rift Valley. Bing Yun informed Lei that if the skyline tree continued to explode, in 2 days, the explosion would reach Darren's village. Half a month later, it would extend to S City. Then, 1 month later, everything within 500 meters of the skyline tree would become a burning hell. Panicked, Lei tapped his fingers on the table and asked Bing Yun about the higher-ups' arrangements. Bing Yun replied that they were instructed to do everything possible to halt the explosion. If they failed, everyone would need to evacuate from S City. Lei stood and asked Bing Yun if there was any news about the goddess martial artist. Bing Yun replied that there currently wasn't any. Lei walked away, instructing Bing Yun to inform all players of their plan to attack the skyline tree for the last time tomorrow. They wouldn't wait for the goddess. Meanwhile, in the deceased country, the goddess sniffed Wu, making him wonder if she was considering eating him. She asked if he had anything to eat, revealing that she hadn't eaten in over half a month. His transformation skill ended, causing his demon form to slowly fade away. The goddess asked why he was turning into a human now. He replied, unsure of how to explain, that he had originally been a human but after being cursed by the goddess, he became a demon. He asked if she believed him. The goddess sniffed him again and stated that her nose was very sensitive. According to her, he hadn't originally been a human. He shyly pushed her back, questioning if she had lost her wits due to hunger. He wondered how she could believe he wasn't human. Reaching into his inventory, he pulled out a piece of bread, intending to offer it to her. The goddess quickly devoured it, leaving Wu dismayed and wondering why she hadn't left any for him. Observing her, he decided she was somewhat naive and wondered how she became a goddess martial artist. Suddenly, the goddess confessed that she also wasn't clear about it. Half a year ago, after the game had invaded Earth, she had become the goddess martial artist. This revelation shocked Wu. Covering his mouth, Wu realized he hadn't spoken aloud and was perplexed as to how she knew his thoughts. The goddess advised him not to overthink. She had a special passive skill that allowed her to read the thoughts of those within a 5-meter radius. Although he had criticized her earlier, she felt he didn't harbor ill intentions. Wu quickly stepped back to a safer distance. He couldn't let her discover that he was the game designer. It would certainly mean his death. The goddess grabbed her shield and asked Wu if he knew how to leave the place. She revealed that she had been fighting dead elves for over a month. But no matter what she did, physical attacks, burning, burying, even magic, they wouldn't die. Realizing she didn't seem to apply much strategic thought, Wu mused that if he had her combat ability, he would have cleared the dungeon long ago. He explained that they were in the deceased country and their enemies weren't living humans, hence why they couldn't die. To leave the deceased country, they had to defeat the boss. She asked if he knew where the boss was located. She'd been there over a month without encountering him even once. Wu pointed upward, suggesting that the boss should be at the highest point. Immediately, she prepared to ascend. Wu attempted to stop her, asking her to let him finish speaking. But she jumped, spear pointed in attack. Unfortunately, she crashed back to the ground. Despite being injured, she sat up and confessed that she couldn't defeat the boss. Wu explained that the deceased country was in a rank difficulty dungeon, the hardest to clear, and even as a goddess martial artist, she wouldn't be able to win alone. Suddenly, something landed heavily on the ground, shattering it in the process. Wu slowly turned and saw a large elf behind him, Nodo Orod. It was a level 90 monster with 235,400,000 HP, 10,000 MP, S-rank status, and it wielded the Arda twin sword. The previous Elf King had been corrupted by evil energy and had become the guardian of the deceased country. Surprised to see a level 90 boss, Wu realized that with the Elf Saint sword, the goddess martial artist couldn't win. He wondered why the Elf King had become the deceased country's boss and feared to look at it, wondering why someone had altered his previously good game settings to such disastrous ones. The king raised its hand, causing Wu and the goddess to become alert. However, it simply pointed at Wu and accused him of being a thief. Confused, Wu pointed at himself just as an interface popped up, asking him if he wanted to hand the Skyline Tree's key to Elf King Nodo Orod. Displaying the Skyline Tree's key, Wu asked Orod if he was looking for it. Orod took it, asking him where he'd found that necklace. Wu replied that Orod's son, Osset, had asked him to deliver it. He then handed over a letter, explaining that besides the necklace, Osset had also entrusted him with it. Later, in the scorched front line, a transport gate materialized. Wu and the goddess emerged from it. He was startled to see the Skyline Tree in bloom, wondering what had transpired when he had the key and questioning why the tree bloomed. The goddess examined Lai, who was sprawled on the ground. She attempted to heal him, but the interface informed her that Lai's health was critically low, making a healing spell ineffective. Lai, relieved that she had returned, informed her that his end was near and she should conserve her energy. He implored her to assist Captain Thunder Armadillo and the others at the Skyline Tree. Wu alerted the goddess that they needed to hurry. Without the key, he explained, no number of players could destroy the Skyline Tree. She took his hand and hoisted him up, urging him to hang on tight because she was about to start running. Initially puzzled, he understood when his soul seemed to depart his body as the goddess dashed forward. Meanwhile, in the Skyline Tree's royal court, the players watched the shield in trepidation, behind which the malevolent dark elves were grinning. Lei, or Thunder Armadillo, had been a typical mercenary until the game invaded Earth. Once bestowed with the lightning god's power, he leveraged it to dominate other associations, ascending as the leader of S-City's player association. Lei struck the shield with his lightning dragon fist, but only managed to cause a minor crack. Yun Teng clan's leader, Zhang Kai, attacked the shield with his weapon next. In a fit of rage, Zhang admonished the Dark Elves for their cowardice, berating them for hiding behind a barrier they couldn't breach. The Dark Elf King, Nodo Luca, level 80 and S-rank, wielded an Ice Blizzard sword. As the younger sibling of Elf King Nodo Orod, Luca embraced the evil energy, fell from grace, and became a Dark Elf. Mocking the humans, Luca explained that without the Skyline Tree's key, they were powerless to break the barrier and could merely watch the Skyline Trees obliterate the world. Zhang provocatively challenged Luca to face him in a fair fight. But Luca dismissively replied that a lowly human was unworthy of his attention. Incensed, Zhang cursed at Luca but was then startled by a sudden presence behind him. The goddess, carrying a dizzy Wu, halted her run. The other players, relieved at her arrival, questioned the identity of the weakling she was supporting. Recognizing him, one player identified him as Wu, the rabbit hunter, to the surprise of the others. They surmised that the goddess must have encountered Wu en route and rescued him. Lei remarked on Wu's fortitude and wondered when he had acquainted himself with the goddess. Wu resolved not to let the goddess carry him in the future, feeling he had been rattled nearly to death. Jiang warmly greeted the goddess, urging her to use her spear and shatter the barrier. Luca questioned how she managed to escape from the deceased country, believing it impossible that she could have defeated the Elf King. Then, Luca noticed something, the skyline tree's key hanging around Wu's neck. Wu drew his sword, triggering murmurs among the crowd, speculating that he was only there to cause trouble. They wondered if the rabbit hunter had lost his mind to challenge a barrier even Thunderlay couldn't break. Seeing the key, Luca barked orders to the Dark Elves to halt Wu. However, before they could advance, the other players roared in anger, swearing to annihilate the cowardly elves to avenge their fallen comrades. They defended Wu and attacked the Dark Elves approaching him. A minute later, Wu arrived at the royal court in the Saint Relic Hall. He placed the necklace back in its original case, prompting the interface to materialize before him. It confirmed his identity and notified him that the skyline tree was in active mode, querying whether he wished to deactivate it. Without hesitation, he selected yes, only to be warned that forcibly stopping the active skyline tree would result in its total destruction. The interface asked again if he wanted to proceed with this risky course of action, and yet again, he emphatically chose yes. The skyline tree shone brightly in the city's streets, its glimmering presence leaving people in wonder about the origins of its petals. A mother and her daughter were particularly enchanted by this spectacle. The daughter, awed by the beauty of the petals, told her mother about her desire to make a wreath from them as a gift for her father. Her father was Lai Zhangyun, the leader of the second offensive team. Ma, who had been caring for Meng Meng, looked out the window with a worried expression. It had been 2 weeks since Wu left, and she wondered if he was safe. The flowers of the skyline tree were in full bloom, but as they lost their petals, the tree was rendered bare, yet it remained resplendent. Meanwhile, Jiang, Lei, and the goddess watched Luca closely. The goddess, wielding her spear, attempted to penetrate Luca's shield. Lei, using his lightning dragon fist, also attacked. But Luca arrogantly dismissed their efforts, saying that even with the inherited power of the Thunder God, Lei remained human, incapable of fully utilizing the deity's power. To Luca's surprise, however, Lei succeeded in shattering the shield. Fear gripped Luca as he felt his powers diminishing and wondered why Wu had control over the skyline tree. His shield faded gradually, leaving him shouting in disbelief about how it could happen. The goddess seized the opportunity to strike Luca with her spear, yet he remained in denial about his predicament. The tree's branches began to crack and tumble to the ground, causing widespread astonishment among the players. The ground also started to fracture and collapse. In response, the players called for an immediate retreat. An announcement was made that the skyline tree had fallen and that the humans had won this round. In the aftermath, at the players' graveyard in S-City, people congregated to honor the players who had sacrificed their lives for the safety of humankind. The leaders, the goddess, and others laid beautiful flowers at the graves of the fallen heroes. The families left behind by these brave individuals were, however, consumed by grief and loss. On this tragic day, 2,032 brave and courageous heroes lost their lives in the skyline tree disaster. They will always be remembered for their valiant fight for humanity. Later, at the hospital, a nurse was stunned to see Meng awake and looking out at the twinkling lights. The nurse urgently called the director, informing him that the VIP patient in room 2 had awakened from her magic element syndrome. Later, Wu arrived and Meng told Wu that she was hungry. Wu, in his excitement, promised to buy her a hamburger and fried chicken. But Ma, furious, questioned his parental judgment and scolded him for intending to feed freshly recovered Meng greasy, unhealthy fast food. Suddenly, a knock on the door paused mid-action as the goddess was startled to learn that Wu had a child. She let out a sigh of sadness, but moments later, a blue light radiated from her body, matching a similar light from Meng's forehead. A lady emerged from Meng's body. Ma questioned Wu about what he had done to Meng, but the mysterious lady attacked Ma, causing her to collapse. The lady then commanded the goddess to enter the room. As she did, she revealed herself to Wu, leaving him stunned. The lady admitted to losing her godly powers during her previous visit, but she hadn't expected to find them within the goddess. Wu inquired if she was the goddess martial artist. The lady conceded that she was, in some respects, but without her godly powers, she didn't count as a god. When Wu asked if she had come to reclaim her powers, she remained silent. Instead, she leaned in and whispered to Wu that the game had resumed. If he wished to survive, he needed to win at all costs. Afterwards, she kissed him on the cheek and vanished, leaving Meng and the goddess to regain their senses. Meng asked about the beautiful woman beside him, making the goddess blush in surprise and wonder about her sudden presence there. Meanwhile, in the inland's deeper areas, a monster emerged from underground and took flight while roaring. a notification popped up announcing the unlocking of the player's level. The player's highest level was now level 90. Meanwhile, deep within a dungeon, a man wondered where all the monsters and the boss had gone. He told his team that he couldn't see any monsters at all. Yun Kang informed Chen Xin that he had heard from the player forum that the skyline tree had collapsed not too long ago, and the dungeon no longer spawned monsters. Chen Xin, who had applied for a player loan last month and had spent over $1 million on new equipment, was worried about how he would repay his debt if they couldn't fight any monsters. In S City, Chang'a Street, also known as the Player Business Street, players were unemployed and selling their equipment at significantly reduced prices. A huge explosion rocked the city and robbers looted shops. Yet, people merely watched the chaos unfold. A man asked his friend how many robberies had occurred that month. His friend expressed concern that if the association didn't find a way to control the players soon, S City would turn into a haven for criminals. In the player association's building, a clan leader level meeting was taking place. The goddess felt embarrassed. The last time she regained consciousness, she had been in Wu's sick ward. She glanced at Wu, wondering if he might think she had feelings for him and how she could strike up a conversation. The Green Sheep Guild leader, Zhang Yunhan, voiced his concerns about the deteriorating state of the association and how allowing any random person to join the meeting was disrespectful. Jiang Kai retorted, reminding Yunhan that without Wu's help during the Skyline Tree battle, they would have perished. Yet, Yunhan continued to display arrogance. A woman pointed out to Jiang that if his statement was accurate, then the city was indeed saved by a low-level player. She introduced herself as Xiao Qi'er, the leader of the Chamber of Commerce, to Wu. Qi'er told Wu that she could offer him diamond rank membership benefits if he needed to purchase anything in the future. Grateful, Wu thanked her. Jiang questioned why Qi'er offered Wu a diamond rank when they had worked so hard and only received a gold rank in return. Qi'er responded with a playful question, asking if she wasn't allowed to like Wu. The goddess pounded the table with her hand, informing Qi'er that Wu already had a daughter. However, Qi'er had done her research. She knew that Wu's daughter was adopted during a disaster, and as far as she was aware, Wu was single. Qi'er teased the goddess about her interest in Wu's personal life. Angrily, a man slammed his hand on the table, and Yunhan voiced his displeasure, calling Wu a trash who relied on women. However, both goddess and Qi'er shot him a warning glare, telling him to be quiet. Wu regretted attending the meeting. 2 days earlier, Wu had opened his door to Lei, who handed him an invitation to the meeting. Lei mentioned that attendees could enjoy the association's best treatment and a monthly allowance of $50,000. Elated by the prospect of this income, Wu looked forward to not having to compete for monsters anymore. In Greenland, players were in heated discussions over killing a jackalope. Life had become harder for the players after the collapse of the Skyline Tree. The value of weapons had plummeted, and monsters were increasingly hard to find. At the meeting, Lei sat down while telling everyone that since they were complete, they should start the meeting. Bing Yun played a video that showcased numerous flying monsters and extraordinarily large creatures attacking players. Qi'er recognized the location in the video as the country's deep abyss pit hole. Bing Yun confirmed her guess, explaining that the pit was spawning high-level monsters, much like the Skyline Tree once did, and it had become the main battlefield. Players from different regions were already heading there to provide support. Impatient, Jiang urged them to join the fight, expressing concern about the survival of his guild. Yunhan criticized the association's slow response, revealing that an overseas player had reached H City a month ago. This statement angered Bing Yun, who glared at Yunhan, with Jiang stuck in between the two. Jiang realized that Yunhan was intentionally causing trouble. 1 month ago, in the command department of H County's Abyss Pit Hole, Qi Yunzhen, the leader of H Country's player association, informed everyone that they had already lost 3 cities. Currently, Z Country's player level is the highest. He then asked why no one was requesting their help. Jin Shenglian, H Country's Minister and Disaster Officer, replied that it was precisely because Z Country's player level was the highest, and they had the best equipment, that they hadn't invited them over. The Abyss Pit Hole's equipment and rewards would undoubtedly be taken by them. He added that they could invite them over, but they would have to share the loot from the Skyline Tree raid. Smith, the acting person in charge of M Country's Player Association, assured them that their association would handle the Deep Abyss, their country's ferocious tiger, and the White Bear Guild was on its way to provide support. Shiro Yusuk, our country association's leader, confirmed that their country's Dark Ninja Guild and White Ghost Guild would arrive the day after tomorrow to provide support. The man from H Country expressed gratitude for their assistance and assured them that they would be compensated as requested after this ordeal. However, Yunzhen scolded them, stating they were treating the citizens like a joke, and they would regret not inviting Z Country to help. Shang Lion reminded Yun Zhen not to forget his identity, mentioning that he himself had given Yun Zhen his title as clan leader and could remove it at any time if he wanted to. This statement surprised Yun Zhen, who promptly left the meeting room. Meanwhile, in S-City's Player Association building, Bing Yun revealed that their side had negotiated with H County more than 3 times. The opposite side believed they had successfully raided the skyline, obtaining a significant number of loots and items. They demanded that half of the acquired items be handed over before they would be allowed onto their island. Jiang was furious to hear this, arguing that the items had been obtained at the cost of their comrades' lives. He challenged Lei, questioning why they had been summoned if not to be informed about this situation, and whether there was any way to handle it. Lei calmly assured him that the meeting wasn't over and there was no need to rush. He then asked Bing Yun to get straight to the point. Bing Yun invited them to view some videos. In these videos, the Deep Abyss Black Dragon Kabata was seen destroying the city. People were hopelessly running for their lives, losing their loved ones, and being left alone on the streets. Players were hastily escaping, monsters relentlessly attacked the citizens, and players who were supposed to fight were hiding in fear. One of the leaders was surprised, comparing the Black Dragon to a mobile raid weapon. Jiang asked Bing Yun when the event took place. Bing Yun revealed that the video was sent by H Country the previous day. According to the latest reports, the second eruption of the Deep Abyss pit hole was a disaster exceeding the Skyline Tree's disaster level. This second eruption had caused the destruction of 3 cities, the elimination of 8 top-tier guilds, over 6,000 players had lost the will to fight, and more than 350,000 citizens had died. After a moment of silence, Lei broke the silence and announced that the war's aftermath was still very present, with each association having suffered heavy damage. The higher-ups didn't plan on sending them into this chaotic situation. However, if the current pace continued, within less than 3 months, H City would entirely collapse, impacting their country's periphery. Lei explained that he had summoned everyone to introduce a special guest and called for the guard to let him in. The person who entered was the H Country Player Association's leader, Qi Yuan Zhen. Jiang accused Yun Zhen of only coming to request their help after being significantly defeated, but Lei intervened. He explained that Yun Zhen had been eager to request their support for the past month and had been in regular contact with them. Lei announced to everyone that the higher-ups had decided to support H Country. The Goddess Martial Group had reached an agreement and was preparing an expeditionary army to help H Country. Applications could be made through the association. Yun Zhen bowed and begged them to save his country. The room fell silent again. Lei asked Jiang why he was silent now when he had been the most vocal earlier. Jiang confessed that while he wanted to help, after watching the video, he didn't want his comrades to sacrifice their lives needlessly. Yun Zheng tearfully pleaded with them to save his country. Yun Han pushed back his chair and questioned Yun Zhen about his actions during the disaster before storming out. He announced his indifference towards Yun Zhen's country and declared the meeting pointless before leaving. Tyr also excused herself, warning the goddess to be careful, as if something happened to her, Wu would be hers. Later, on the highway, Yun Han asked the man about the situation and whether there were any leads. The man handed him a paper, revealing he had found clues and had identified the player most likely responsible for Brother Zhang's death. Yun Han was surprised to recognize the person, causing the man to ask if he knew the person in the picture. Yun Han confirmed that he had attended a meeting with him. The man revealed that during his investigation, he had uncovered something very intriguing. The man reported to Yun Han that the person was called Zhuang Wu and 3 months ago, Wu was still a novice. He obtained a unique title. People called him the Rabbit Hunter because he was so afraid of dying that he only hunted horned rabbits for half a year. What a coincidence it was that after that system notification, the Rabbit Hunter no longer hunted horned rabbits, and even more interesting was that he was a part of that team. What was even more unbelievable was that Wu only spent 2 days to complete the Drunkard's Chain mission, and obtained the historical rank mission. Zhang Tianyi started to go after the Rabbit Hunter because of that mission. But by the time he arrived, Zhang Tianyi had already died. Yun Han asked the man if he was certain that Wu killed his little brother. The man replied that once could be an accident, twice a coincidence, but the third time or more meant it was inevitable. Then he told Yun Han that he suspected that Wu was connected to the raid god. If they could get in touch with the raid god through Wu, within half a year, their Green Lamb Guild could become S-City's strongest guild, perhaps even the strongest in the world. He then warned Yun Han about the potential trouble with Wu being friends with the martial goddess. Yun Han replied that if they could turn Wu into an obedient dog, there would be no trouble. The man asked Yun Han if he planned to use the artifact. Yun Han responded that Wu was someone who killed his little brother, so he couldn't let him die easily. He found it too pitiful, and he must make Wu feel that it was worse than death and make Wu beg for his own end. Meanwhile, Wu was in his apartment in front of his computer. He thought that according to past game design, the Black Dragon would protect the Dragon Egg and not leave the Deep Abyss, but that destructive power far exceeded his design. After the Skyline Tree's ammeter, he realized that it wasn't the same game that he had designed. Then he noticed someone on the dragon's head and wondered what it was. He activated his hunt mark and noticed that it was someone, possibly stronger than the black dragon, using it as a mount. He remembered the lady telling him that the game had already continued and if he wanted to survive, he must win all the way. While watching the video, he was pondering about the god's game. He remembered the King of Elves thanking him for setting him free. He looked at his paper, wondering if it was the game he had designed, if the game had invaded Earth, or if such a world had always existed. Holding his head, he wondered if an original world existed. How would he know, and what was the evil energy that could control the Elf King? Meng handed him a cup of hot tea, which she had brewed for him. He was patting Meng, telling her that she was a good girl, when suddenly, he saw what Meng saw outside their window. The interface warned him that a large amount of energy was approaching. He immediately grabbed Meng and jumped out of his apartment. They landed safely, but Meng was dizzy from the sudden jump. Yanhan said he knew Wu wouldn't die so easily. Wu asked Yanhan if he knew what he was doing and if he wasn't scared that the association would find him trouble. Yanhan laughed and asked when he had ever been scared of the association. And when he had an objective, no one could stop him. Then Yanhan asked him if he had killed his little brother. Wu brandished a long sword and teasingly asked Yanhan if he was referring to the owner of that sword. Yanhan furiously told him he was going to die. Then Yanhan lunged at him to attack. Wu activated his hunt mark, then he saw critical positions that he could hit. He blocked Yanhan's attack using the long sword. Yanhan told him, thinking that he was going to become his god. He felt excited. But then, Yanhan's sword broke in half, leaving him stunned. The man told Yanhan to be careful because there was something strange about Wu. Yanhan told Wu that he had many weapons, so they should see how long he could last. Then Yanhan revealed another weapon and immediately attacked him. Wu teasingly told Yanhan that compared to the martial goddess, his attacks were too weak. This made Yanhan furious, and he attacked him again, accusing him of seeking death. The man warned Yanhan that Wu had many secrets, so he shouldn't kill him. On the other hand, the martial goddess saw a strong power in the distance and she thought that it seemed to be coming from Zhuang Wu's house. Meanwhile, in the office, Bing Yun reported to Lei that Yanhan had just attacked Zhuang Wu. Lei furiously replied that the Green Lamb Guild should be destroyed, as it was of no use anymore. Well guys, that's the end of the video. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.